I don't think I've ever felt humiliation like that in my entire life. Even now, months later, I still can't look at a spiral notebook without my chest tightening. I know it sounds dramatic, but if you've ever had something private, something raw, messy, deeply personal, read out loud to 30 people you barely trust, you'll understand. My name's Emma Torres, and this story starts on an ordinary Tuesday morning in my junior year. I wasn't the kind of kid teachers remembered for being loud or trouble. I was the quiet one. The kid who sat by the window, scribbling in her journal when everyone else was glued to their phones. That journal wasn't for class, it was for me. I wrote everything in it, the things I couldn't say, the things I didn't want anyone to know, the kind of thoughts you'd only admit to an empty room at 2 a.m. And unfortunately, that's exactly the journal my English teacher, Mr. Reynolds, decided to read out loud to the entire class. But before I get to that part, let me back up. Mr. Reynolds was new that year, fresh out of grad school, enthusiastic, trying too hard to be the cool teacher. He'd joke with us, let us play music during writing assignments, and occasionally share personal stories that blurred the line between teacher and friend. At first, everyone loved him. I did too, honestly. He made English feel alive again, not just another chore. Around mid-October, he introduced a new project called The Voice Within. The idea was to keep a reflective journal where we'd write about our emotions, daily experiences, or anything that shaped us. We were supposed to turn in one entry every Friday. Simple enough. The thing is, I already had a journal. My real one. The one I'd kept since freshman year. So instead of starting a new notebook, I decided to use that one, just carefully pick which entries I'd share, and leave the rest private. I'd just tear out the appropriate pages each week. Except one Friday morning, I was running late. My bus was early, my brother spilled orange juice on my bag, and in the chaos, I grabbed the wrong notebook. I didn't realize it until halfway through English class when Mr. Reynolds collected everyone's journals. I froze when he reached my desk. I remember feeling my stomach drop as I handed it to him, this dull panic whispering you'll get it back before he reads it. But then he smiled and said, "Can't wait to read what you've got this week, Emma. You always go deep." I think I smiled back. My brain was screaming, but I didn't want to look suspicious. So I sat there, nodding, dying inside. I planned to ask for it right after class, but the bell rang and he got pulled into a conversation with another teacher. Before I could speak, he said, "Emma, I'll hang on to yours. I want to read it before next period. You're one of the few who actually takes this seriously." I wanted to protest, but everyone was watching. I told myself he'd only skim the top page. It'd be fine. It wasn't. The next day, everything exploded. It started innocently. I walked into class, and Mr. Reynolds had this grin on his face. He said, "We're doing something different today. I want to share a few examples of authentic, emotional writing." He held up my journal. My journal. My blood went cold. I remember stammering something like, "Wait, that's not," but he didn't hear me, or pretended not to. He started reading. Out loud. To everyone. At first, I thought maybe he'd picked one of the safe pages, something I wouldn't mind sharing. But no. It was from a section I'd written weeks earlier, an entry about how invisible I felt at school, how my parents barely talked anymore, how I secretly envied people who could just be confident. I'd written about a guy in class I had a crush on, Ethan, and how pathetic I felt for liking someone who barely knew I existed. The second he read Ethan's name, the whole room shifted. You could feel it, the collective inhale, the whispers, the stifled giggles. I wanted to disappear. I couldn't move. My face was burning, my hands shaking under the desk. Mr. Reynolds just kept reading. He didn't even seem to realize what he was doing. He was too wrapped up in his own lesson about emotional honesty. I heard every word echo through the room, each one slicing me open. My heart was pounding so hard I couldn't hear half of it. When he finally stopped, he said something like, "Now that's vulnerability. That's the kind of writing that connects us." Everyone was staring at me. Ethan's face was red. A few kids laughed. Others looked awkward, sympathetic, or just stunned. I couldn't breathe. I got up and left. I don't remember walking out, I just remember the hallway spinning, the sound of my heartbeat in my ears. I locked myself in a bathroom stall and sat there for what felt like hours. When I finally came out, the bell had already rung. My phone buzzed non-stop, texts, Snapchats, DMs, someone had posted a video clip of it. Apparently, one of my classmates, Kara, had recorded the whole thing and shared it in our group chat. The caption said, "When your teacher accidentally exposes Emma's love life skull." My stomach twisted when I saw it. It had already been viewed dozens of times. I wanted to throw my phone in the toilet. By the end of the day, half the school knew. People whispered in the hallways. Ethan wouldn't even look at me. Mr. Reynolds tried to find me later, but I avoided him. I couldn't even think straight. That night, I got an email from him. The subject line said, "Emma, I am so sorry." He wrote that it was an honest mistake, that he thought it was the assignment journal, not a personal one. He said he wanted to apologize in person, but I wasn't ready for that. The thing is, even if it was an accident, part of me couldn't shake the feeling that there was something strange about it. Because the page he read wasn't near the top, it was buried deep inside. Near the middle. Which meant he had flipped through, page after page, before finding it. And that made me wonder, why that entry? Why read that one out loud? I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice again, reading my words like they were just some class example instead of the most private thoughts I'd ever written. My mom noticed I'd been crying and tried to ask what was wrong, but I just said I wasn't feeling well. I couldn't tell her. I couldn't tell anyone. The next morning, I thought about skipping school, but the idea of missing class and letting rumors spread without me there to defend myself made me feel even sicker. So I went. Big mistake. The moment I walked through the main doors, I could feel it. The looks. The half-smiles. The whispers that stopped just as I passed. Someone even fake-coughed Ethan as I walked by. My stomach twisted. I kept my eyes down and went straight to my locker, trying to ignore the way my hands were shaking. When I got to English, Mr. Reynolds was waiting by the door. He said my name softly, like he was trying not to scare me. "Emma, can we talk for a minute before class?" I froze. My mind screamed no, but my mouth said, "Sure." We stepped into the hallway, and he looked nervous, like genuinely nervous. His voice was quiet, apologetic. He said he hadn't meant to humiliate me, that he thought it was my project journal. He swore he'd only flipped through a few pages to find something meaningful to share, and that he had no idea it was private. He said he wanted to make it right. But then he said something that didn't sit right with me. "You really are a talented writer," he said. "Even with what happened, people connected with your words." I remember just staring at him, thinking, connected? That wasn't connection. That was exposure. I didn't say anything, just nodded, muttered something like, "It's fine," and walked away before the bell rang. The rest of the day was a blur. I sat in the back, pretending to take notes while trying not to look up. When class ended, I saw that my journal was on his desk. He called after me, "Emma, don't forget this." I hesitated before taking it. It felt heavier somehow, like it wasn't mine anymore. Later that day, I went through every page. I noticed something strange. A few of the middle pages were bent slightly, like someone had held them open too long. And there was a faint smudge, like a thumbprint, right beside that specific entry he read. I know how it sounds. Maybe I was just paranoid. But something in my gut said otherwise. That night, I texted Kara, the girl who'd filmed it, and asked her to delete the video. She said she already did, but then she hesitated and added, "You know, Reynolds didn't seem that surprised when he realized what he'd read. He looked weird." That stuck with me. What did she mean by weird? She sent another message before I could reply. He smiled. Like, not a lot, but still. For a second. I didn't answer after that. I didn't know what to say. Over the weekend, I tried to move on. I told myself maybe it really was a mistake. Maybe Kara was reading too much into it. By Monday, things at school had mostly cooled down. The jokes faded, Ethan avoided me, and people moved on to new gossip. But Mr. Reynolds started acting differently. He kept giving me these long looks in class, like he wanted to say something but didn't. Once, during lunch, he passed me in the hallway and said, "Hope you're doing okay." I just nodded, but it felt strange, too personal, like we shared some secret that I hadn't agreed to. Then things got even weirder. About a week later, I got called to the office during English. The secretary said Mr. Reynolds had asked for me. When I walked in, he was sitting there with a stack of papers. "Hey, Emma," he said. "I wanted to talk about your writing project. You've got a real gift, and I was thinking of submitting one of your pieces to the regional creative writing contest. With your permission, of course." My stomach clenched. "Which piece?" I asked. He smiled, too calmly, and said, "The one I read in class." I just stared at him. That couldn't be real. That entry wasn't even written for school. It was personal, messy, filled with things no one should have seen. "No," I said immediately. "You can't use that." He raised his hands like he understood. "Of course. Totally your choice. I just thought, people really responded to it. There's something raw there." I didn't even answer. I just left. After that, I started to avoid him completely. I stopped raising my hand, stopped participating. Every time he walked past my desk, I felt this wave of disgust and confusion. I didn't know if I was overreacting or if something was actually off about him. Then one day after school, I went to grab a book I'd left in class. The door was unlocked, and the room was empty. As I walked to my desk, I noticed something on his table, my old journal. Not the one for class. The one I'd taken home. My actual journal. I froze. How could it be there? I had it in my backpack the last time I checked. My name was written on the inside cover in black marker. I picked it up, flipping through. Several pages near the back were torn out. My hands went cold. My head spun. I dropped it and ran. I don't remember much after that, just locking myself in the bathroom again, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. Later that evening, I went to his email again. I'd kept that old apology message. For some reason, I decided to look closer. And that's when I saw it, an attached file I hadn't noticed before. It was a PDF titled Emma_Torres_writing sample. My pulse spiked. I opened it. It was my journal entry. The same one he'd read. But at the bottom, there was a header, submitted to Midwestern Regional Student Writing Contest. Submitted. Not suggested. He'd already sent it in. Without my permission. I stared at the screen, unable to move. That's when I realized this wasn't just some accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. Mr. Reynolds hadn't made a mistake at all. He'd chosen that entry. He'd taken it. And he'd used it, for himself. I didn't know what to do. I just sat there staring at that email, my hands trembling so badly I could barely scroll. The timestamp said it was sent 3 days ago, meaning he'd submitted my work after apologizing. He'd looked me in the eye, said it was all a misunderstanding, and then literally used my private writing behind my back. I felt sick. I couldn't tell if I wanted to cry or scream. My first instinct was to delete the file and pretend I hadn't seen it. But I couldn't. Something in me, maybe the tiny, angry part that still had a shred of pride, refused to let it go. So I printed the email and the attached file, tucked them into my binder, and told myself I'd deal with it Monday. But Monday didn't go as planned. When I walked into class, Mr. Reynolds was in an unusually good mood. He was standing by the board, talking to another teacher, and I overheard him say, yeah, one of my students wrote this amazing piece. Might actually win. He looked right at me when he said it. My skin crawled. The rest of the day, I could barely focus. My mind was spinning with 100 versions of what I wanted to say to him, each one ending with me being either suspended or humiliated again. At lunch, I finally told someone. Kara. I pulled her aside and showed her the printout. Her jaw dropped. Wait, she said, he actually submitted it? Like, under your name or his? I hadn't even thought to check. My chest tightened as I realized that I didn't know. We searched the contest's website on her phone, scrolling through the recent submissions section. And there it was. The title was slightly changed, he'd added some pretentious subtitle, but the author listed was him. Written by Daniel Reynolds. My vision blurred. Kara's face twisted in shock. Emma, that's illegal, right? Like, that's plagiarism. He can't just, but before she could finish, the bell rang. I couldn't even think straight in my next class. I just kept staring at my notebook, trying not to cry. When the final bell rang, I didn't go home. I went straight to the vice principal's office. Her name was Mrs. Cunningham, an older woman with the kind of calm voice that made you feel like things could be fixed. I showed her everything, the email, the file, the contest submission. At first, she looked confused, like she couldn't believe what she was reading. Then she frowned. You're sure he didn't have permission? I shook my head. He apologized for reading it out loud, but I never told him he could submit it anywhere. I didn't even know he did. She pursed her lips and told me she'd look into it immediately. I left her office feeling relieved, like maybe I'd finally done something right. But that relief lasted about an hour. After dinner that night, I got an email from Mr. Reynolds. The subject line was, "We need to talk." My chest tightened. Against every rational instinct, I opened it. It said, "Emma, I know you spoke with Mrs. Cunningham today. I wish you had come to me first. There's been a huge misunderstanding, and I want to clear it up privately. Please stop by after school tomorrow. It's important." My stomach dropped. He knew. I sat there frozen for a long time before finally forwarding the message to my mom's email without explanation. I didn't plan to go anywhere near his classroom the next day. But fate, or maybe just bad luck, had other plans. The next morning, Mrs. Cunningham wasn't in her office. The secretary said she'd gone home sick. I waited until lunch, hoping maybe another administrator could talk to me, but nobody was available. Around 3 p.m., when the hallway started emptying, I decided to grab my stuff from my locker before heading out. As I passed the English wing, I heard my name. Emma? It was him. Mr. Reynolds was standing by his classroom door, smiling like nothing was wrong. "Glad I caught you," he said. "Can we talk for a sec?" Every instinct told me to walk away, but I was too stunned to move. He stepped aside, gesturing toward the classroom. "Just a minute, I promise." I hesitated, then stepped inside, keeping close to the door. He closed it behind me. "Listen," he said, leaning against his desk. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I never meant to make you uncomfortable. That entry, your entry, it really moved me. It reminded me why I started teaching in the first place. I wanted to share it with the world. I thought submitting it would be honoring it." My throat felt dry. "You submitted it under your name," I said quietly. He sighed. "The contest doesn't allow student entries directly. I used mine to get it seen. I was going to credit you later if it advanced." His tone was so calm, so reasonable, that for a second I almost believed him. But then I remembered the smile Kara saw when he read it out loud. The way he'd called it authentic and raw. The way he'd said people connected with it. He wasn't sorry. He was proud. "You shouldn't have done that," I said. My voice shook, but I didn't care. He frowned slightly, like I'd disappointed him. Emma, I'm trying to help you. You have talent, but you don't see it. Sometimes people need a push. He took a step forward, lowering his voice. You could go far if you trust me. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I grabbed my bag and went for the door, but his hand brushed my arm, not hard, but enough to make my heart lurch. Emma, wait, he said. Don't make this into something it's not. I yanked my arm away. Don't touch me, I said, louder than I meant to. His expression shifted, something dark flickered behind his eyes, but he stepped back. I ran out without looking back. That night, I told my mom everything. I expected her to be angry at me for not saying something sooner, but instead she just went quiet, deadly calm. The next morning, she came with me to school. She didn't ask to speak with Mrs. Cunningham. She went straight to the principal. The meeting lasted over an hour. When we came out, my mom's face was pale, and the principal looked furious. Mr. Reynolds was suspended that same afternoon. But the story didn't end there. Because 2 days later, something even stranger happened. I got another email, from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line said, "You don't know the whole story." My hands trembled as I opened it. There was no message, just a single attached photo. It was a picture of my journal, lying open on what looked like a kitchen table. The background was blurred, but I could see a coffee mug and a laptop. And in the corner of the frame, was a hand. His hand. I dropped my phone when I saw the photo. It wasn't just the image that freaked me out, it was the timestamp. It had been sent at 2:43 a.m. The middle of the night. The fact that he still had pictures of my journal even after being suspended made my skin crawl. My mom was in the kitchen when I walked in, white as a ghost, clutching my phone like it might burn me. When I showed her, she covered her mouth. Emma, this isn't over. I could tell she was terrified but trying not to show it. She immediately called the school. They told her not to worry, that Mr. Reynolds had been asked not to contact us, and that they'd handle it. But handle it apparently meant waiting around while I jumped every time my phone buzzed. The next 2 days were tense and sleepless. Every sound outside my window made my chest tighten. Every time a notification popped up, I felt sick. On the third night, I got another email. No subject line this time. Just an attachment named truth.txt. My mom wanted to go to the police, but something told me to open it first. Against my better judgment, I did. The message inside wasn't what I expected. It started with, "You think I'm the villain here, but you don't understand what's really happening." My stomach twisted. That journal of yours, it's more than you think. I didn't choose that entry at random. You wrote something you shouldn't have, Emma. Something that wasn't supposed to exist. My eyes darted over the screen, confused, horrified. What was he even talking about? That night, the message continued, "When you wrote about hearing noises from the attic and thinking it was just your imagination, did you ever check?" I did. And you were right to be scared. I froze. My throat tightened. That entry. The one he was referring to, I remembered it. I'd written it weeks ago after hearing strange scratching noises above my room. I'd convinced myself it was squirrels or pipes and laughed it off. I'd forgotten I even mentioned it. But the fact that he knew about it meant he'd read more of my journal than I thought. "There's something in your house," the email said. Something I found. That was it. No sign-off, no name, just that chilling last line. My mom thought it was some manipulative attempt to scare us, and she called the police right away. An officer came to our house, took screenshots, and said they'd report it as harassment. They promised to keep an eye out, but there wasn't much else they could do since he hadn't directly threatened me. Still, that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the attic. About the soft creaking sounds I'd ignored before. Around 1 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and climbed the narrow stairs up to the attic. The air up there was thick and dusty. My heart pounded as I scanned the space: old boxes, a broken fan, some Christmas decorations. Nothing unusual. I almost laughed at myself. But then I saw it, a small section of insulation pulled back near the corner. I crouched down, shined the light closer, and saw something wedged in the gap. A flash drive. My hands were shaking as I pulled it out. It was old and dusty, but still intact. I took it downstairs, locked the attic door behind me, and plugged it into my laptop. It had one file on it, video001.mp4. I almost didn't open it. I should have stopped there. But curiosity, or fear, won. The video started with static, then a shaky view of what looked like my bedroom. My breath caught. The angle was weird, like it was being filmed from somewhere high up. The camera didn't move, but the frame clearly showed me lying in bed, scrolling on my phone, completely unaware. I felt my whole body go cold. The video was timestamped from a few weeks ago. The same night I'd written that journal entry. I slammed the laptop shut and burst into tears. My mom came running. When I showed her, she went completely silent. Her face turned gray. We called the police again, this time demanding they send someone immediately. They took the flash drive, asked a ton of questions, and told us not to stay in the house for the night. We checked into a motel nearby, but I couldn't sleep. The idea that someone had been in our attic, watching us, filming me, made my skin crawl. The next morning, an officer called and said they'd found evidence of forced entry in the attic window. Someone had clearly been up there multiple times. But it got worse. When they traced the fingerprints on the insulation, they found two sets. One belonged to a man with a record for breaking and entering, someone who had lived in our neighborhood years ago. The other matched Mr. Reynolds. That's when everything started to unravel. The police showed us the evidence later that day. They said he'd apparently gone up there to investigate after reading about the noises in my journal, claiming he was concerned for my safety. But the footage told a different story. In some of the later videos, they could see him in frame, moving the camera, adjusting the angle, even picking up my notebooks from my desk. I wanted to throw up. My mom broke down completely. It turned out he'd been reading my journal long before the classroom incident. Weeks before. The first time he saw me writing after class, he must have gotten curious. Maybe even obsessed. He'd somehow found our address, probably from school records, and broken in multiple times to take photos, to film, to read. The reason he chose that journal entry to read aloud suddenly made sense. It was a twisted way to test how much control he had over me. The contest submission, the emails, even the creepy "there's something in your house" message, it was all part of this sick power game. When the police arrested him 2 days later, I thought it was finally over. But that same night, I got one last message from the unknown email. It said, "You're welcome for finding it before he did." No name, no context, just that. I stared at it for hours, trying to understand what it meant. The "he" clearly referred to Mr. Reynolds, but then who was I? And what exactly had they found? I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. The police had assured us Mr. Reynolds was in custody, but that last message burned in my head like a fever. "You're welcome for finding it before he did." I couldn't shake it. Before he did? Who was the I? Another person? Another intruder? My thoughts kept looping back to that attic, that flash drive, those videos. The idea that there might have been someone else, someone besides him, made my skin crawl all over again. The next morning, my mom went to meet with the detectives while I stayed at the motel. I should have been relieved, but instead I just sat on the bed, scrolling through every email, every screenshot, trying to piece it all together. That's when I noticed something small I'd missed before. The unknown emails, the creepy ones about the attic, they hadn't come from a totally random address. The username was j.reynolds.archive. Reynolds. But his name was Daniel. Not Jay. I felt this cold weight settle in my stomach. Could it be a relative? I Googled him, digging deeper than I had before. The first thing that came up was a short bio from an old university alumni page. Daniel Reynolds, English instructor. Research interest, posthumous literary works. Brother of the late James Reynolds. My heart stopped. James Reynolds. J. Reynolds. I didn't know what late meant until I clicked another link, an old news article from 2 years ago. It was about a man found dead in a nearby town. The headline read, "Local teacher dies in suspected home invasion. Attic discovery raises questions." I didn't want to keep reading, but I couldn't stop. The article said James Reynolds had been found in his home after neighbors reported strange noises. When police arrived, they found hidden recording equipment in his attic, footage that appeared to show people living in nearby houses. He'd been found dead from a fall down the stairs. They called it an accident. My hands were trembling so hard I almost dropped my phone. I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to process what this meant. Was Daniel following in his brother's footsteps? Was he copying him, or trying to find out what really happened? Before I could make sense of it, my phone buzzed again. Another email. Same address. No subject. Just one line, "You should check the journal again." My heart started pounding. Against every shred of logic, I opened my bag and pulled it out. I hadn't touched it since the day everything blew up. The cover was bent, the pages frayed. I flipped through until I noticed something odd. One of the pages in the back had been taped together, like someone had sealed it. My fingers shook as I peeled it open. Between the pages was a small folded sheet of paper, yellowed around the edges. It wasn't mine. The handwriting was different, neater, older. It said, "If you're reading this, he found you too." My chest went tight. There were more lines below, written in frantic slanted letters. "He watches through words. Don't write. Don't feed him." That's all it said. I didn't understand what it meant, but the paper looked like it had been there a long time, long before I ever owned that notebook. I tried to think back to where I'd gotten it. I'd bought it secondhand from a thrift store months ago. A cheap spiral-bound journal with a few blank pages ripped out. I'd thought nothing of it. My mind raced. What if the journal had belonged to someone before me, someone connected to all of this? Maybe even to Daniel's brother? My phone buzzed again. A video this time. I almost couldn't look. The thumbnail showed a shaky shot of what looked like the motel hallway. I hit play. The camera moved slowly, down the hall, toward our door. My chest constricted. The video ended abruptly right as it reached our room number. I screamed for my mom. She came running from the bathroom, saw my face, grabbed the phone, and froze. "Pack your things," she said. "Now." We ran to the car, hearts pounding, and called the police again. They arrived within minutes, combing through the motel footage. But there was nothing. No one matched the figure from the video. The IP address from the emails was traced to multiple locations, constantly bouncing, untraceable. It was like whoever was sending them didn't exist. That night, the detective called my mom to say that when they examined the flash drive more carefully, they'd found fragments of other video files, recordings not from our house, but from other people's homes. Some of them dated back years. They thought Daniel had been keeping them as part of his research. But a few of the timestamps were from before he'd even started teaching. Before he could have made those recordings himself. The implication was horrifying. Someone else had been doing it first. Maybe even his brother. Maybe it had all started with James. I couldn't stop thinking about that note hidden in my journal. "He watches through words." It sounded insane, but the more I thought about it, the more it fit. Both brothers had been obsessed with written expression, authentic voices, vulnerability. Both had invaded other people's privacy, fixated on their inner worlds. It was like they fed off confession. Mr. Reynolds wasn't just obsessed with me, he was continuing some pattern, something he'd inherited. A sickness disguised as curiosity. The next morning, We moved in with my aunt 2 towns over. I tried to start over, but it wasn't easy. Sometimes I'd wake up and swear I heard the faint sound of pen scratching in the dark, like someone writing when the room should be silent. I threw the old journal away, or thought I did. A few weeks later, a package showed up at our new address. No return label. Inside was the same journal. Cleaned, untorn, as if it had never been touched. My name was written on the inside cover in handwriting that wasn't mine. And underneath, in small, perfect letters, it said, "For your next story." The police said it was probably some leftover prank from the case, maybe evidence that got misplaced and sent accidentally. But I know better. I burned it that night. Or tried to. The next morning, the ashes were gone. In their place, on my desk, was a single piece of paper. Blank, except for one sentence written in the center: "You can't stop writing, Emma." I don't know if it's over. I don't even know if it ever really started with me. All I know is that every time I try to forget, every time I pick up a pen, I can feel eyes on me again. Watching. Reading. Waiting for the next word.